My name is Ellen. I'm 28 years old, and what happened at my nephew's birthday party last month still makes my hands shake. I watched in horror as my mother cruelly mocked a deaf child's attempts to communicate. The child's eyes filled with tears as adults laughed. I was about to intervene when our longtime maid, Holly, suddenly stepped forward, her face pale with fury. "Stop laughing!" Holly commanded with unexpected authority. "That child you're mocking, he's your grandson." The laughter died instantly as my mother's champagne glass shattered on marble. Before I continue this shocking story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's witnessed family secrets explode in public? Have you ever seen karma deliver instant justice? Please hit that like button. If you believe every child deserves respect, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about perfect families. Trust me, the revelation that silenced an entire party is just the beginning of this twisted tale. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut, I thought we were the epitome of American success. My father, Jim, ran a multinational corporation that his father had built from nothing, while my mother, Iris, graced every charity gala and society page from here to Manhattan. Our colonial mansion sat on 10 pristine acres, complete with tennis courts and a pool house bigger than most people's homes. To outsiders, we were living the dream, but perfect facades often hide the ugliest truths. My younger brother Jacob, now 26, had always been the golden child. While I struggled to meet my parents' impossibly high standards, Jacob effortlessly excelled at everything. Harvard Business School engagement to hope from an equally prominent family, and a fast-track position at Dad's company. I, on the other hand, chose social work, which my mother called Ellen's little rebellion phase that hopefully won't last much longer. The cracks in our family foundation started showing 3 years ago when I accidentally discovered adoption papers in my father's study. I was 25 years old and had lived my entire life not knowing I wasn't their biological daughter. When I confronted them, my mother's response was chillingly dismissive. "We gave you everything, Ellen. Does it really matter whose blood runs through your veins? Don't be so ungrateful." That discovery changed everything. Suddenly, the subtle differences in how they treated Jacob versus me made horrible sense. The way my mother would introduce Jacob as our son, the Harvard graduate, while I was simply, "and this is Ellen." The way family heirlooms were already earmarked for Jacob's future children, while I was told I could pick something from the guest room if you really want a keepsake. The only person who showed me genuine affection in that house was Holly, our maid of 20 years. Holly had started working for us when I was 8, and she'd been more of a mother to me than Iris ever was. She taught me to tie my shoes, helped with homework, and held me when I cried after my parents' particularly harsh criticisms. Holly was the one who attended my school plays when my parents were too busy with important matters. Which brings me to that fateful birthday party. Jacob's son was turning 5, and my mother had orchestrated what she called a modest gathering, which translated to 200 guests, a string quartet, and catering from the city's most exclusive restaurant. The party was less about celebrating little Theodore and more about Iris showing off her grandson to her social circle. I arrived early to help set up, though my mother made it clear my help wasn't particularly wanted. "Just try not to get in the way, Ellen. And please tell me you're not wearing that to the party." I looked down at my simple sundress, apparently not up to Iris's standards as usual. As guests began arriving, I noticed a woman from the neighborhood bringing a young boy. The child, who looked about 6, was signing animatedly with his hands. His name was Jamie, and the neighbor explained he was deaf, currently in foster care, and she thought it would be nice for him to enjoy a party with other children. My mother's smile tightened imperceptibly, but she maintained her hostess facade. At first, the mockery was subtle. I saw my mother whisper something to her friend Janet, both of them glancing at Jamie with barely concealed disdain. Then, as Jamie tried to communicate with other children using gestures and signs, my mother began imitating his hand movements in an exaggerated, mocking way. "Look at him flapping around like a little bird," she said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Some laughed nervously, others joined in more enthusiastically. The cruelty escalated when Jamie approached the birthday cake table, signing excitedly. My mother stood behind him, copying his movements with theatrical exaggeration. "Oh, how precious," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "He's trying so hard to be normal." Her circle of friends tittered with laughter. I felt my stomach turn as I watched Jamie's confusion turn to hurt. His bright eyes dimmed as he realized the adults were laughing at him, not with him. He might not have heard their words, but children always understand mockery. My hands clenched into fists, and I took a step forward, ready to confront my mother despite knowing it would mean social suicide at this party. But Holly beat me to it. I'd noticed her watching from her usual corner where she supervised the catering staff. Her face had grown increasingly pale as the mockery continued, her hands trembling as she gripped a serving tray. When my mother made a particularly cruel gesture, pretending to be unable to speak while pointing at Jamie, Holly suddenly dropped the tray with a tremendous crash. The entire party turned to look as Holly strode across the lawn, her usual subservient demeanor completely transformed. I'd never seen such fury in her eyes, such determination in her step. She positioned herself between Jamie and my mother, her voice cutting through the afternoon air like a blade. The silence that followed Holly's declaration was deafening. 200 guests stood frozen champagne flutes halfway to Lips canapes suspended in midair. My mother's face cycled through expressions I'd never seen before. Shock rage, fear, and finally, desperate denial. "You're insane," Iris hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. "How dare you make such ridiculous accusations? You're fired. Get out of my house immediately before I call the police." But Holly stood her ground, pulling a manila envelope from her apron pocket. "I've waited 7 years for this moment, Mrs. Hamilton. 7 years of watching you pretend that child doesn't exist. But I have proof. DNA tests, hospital records, everything." My mind raced to process what was happening. Jamie, my mother's grandson. That would mean... I looked at Jacob, whose face had gone ashen. He stood next to Hope, who was gripping his arms so tightly her knuckles were white. "You're lying," my mother repeated, but her voice wavered now. "Security, someone remove this woman." "Let her speak," Jacob said, suddenly his voice hoarse. "Holly, what are you talking about?" Holly's eyes softened slightly as she looked at Jacob. "You didn't know, did you? About Janice? About what happened to her?" The name hit Jacob like a physical blow. He staggered backward, Hope steadying him. "Janice. From the company. But she left. She moved away." "No," Holly said quietly. "She didn't move away. She died, Mr. Jacob. She died giving birth to your son 7 years ago. The son your parents paid her to hide. The son they abandoned to the foster system rather than acknowledge." The party guests had formed a circle around us, now their shock palpable. Some were already pulling out phones, whether to call for help or record the drama, I couldn't tell. Holly continued, her voice growing stronger. "Janice worked in accounting at your father's company. She was deaf brilliant with numbers, and you fell for her during those late nights at the office. When she told you she was pregnant, you panicked. You were engaged to Hope, your parents had expectations, and a deaf mistress carrying your child didn't fit the Hamilton family image." "I didn't know she was pregnant," Jacob shouted, tears streaming down his face. She said she was transferring to the Seattle office. My parents said they'd helped arrange it, that it was better for everyone if she started fresh somewhere else. Your parents lied? Holly said, pulling documents from her envelope. Here's the paper trail. $500,000 transferred to Janice's account with the stipulation that she never contact the family again. Medical records from her pregnancy listing you as the father. The death certificate from complications during delivery. And adoption papers placing Jamie in state care because he had no legal guardian. Hope released Jacob's arm as if it burned her. You had an affair while we were engaged. The sound of a car screeching into the driveway interrupted the confession. My father burst from his Mercedes, having clearly been alerted to the crisis. He took in the scene the frozen party Holly with her documents, my mother's shattered composure, and Jamie standing confused and frightened in the middle of it all. What the hell is going on here? Jim demanded. Your maid has lost her mind, Iris said quickly. She's making insane accusations about Jacob and some woman from the company. But Holly was ready for him, too. Mr. Hamilton, would you like to explain to everyone here why you authorized a $500,000 payment to a junior accountant 7 years ago? Or why you personally signed the papers? Surrendering parental rights for a child who supposedly didn't exist. My father's commanding presence faltered. In all my years, I'd never seen him speechless. He looked between Holly, Jacob, and finally at Jamie, and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. Dad? Jacob's voice broke like a teenager's. Tell me you didn't know about my son. Tell me you didn't hide this from me. The silence stretched until Hope's bitter laugh shattered it. Of course they knew. This is exactly the kind of thing the mighty Hamiltons would do. Image over everything, right, Jim? That's when Hope dropped her own bombshell. You want to know something funny? I've suspected for months that this family was hiding something. That's why I hired a private investigator. Henry, would you like to join the party? A tall man in a dark suit emerged from the crowd of guests. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he approached with professional determination. Mrs. Hamilton, he addressed Hope, I've compiled the information you requested. My mother tried one last desperate gambit. This is ridiculous. We're being ambushed by disgruntled employees and conspiracies. Someone call our lawyer. And I'm already here, Iris, a voice called out. Isaac Friedman, the family attorney for 3 decades, stepped forward. His expression was grim. And I'm afraid I'm here in a different capacity than you might expect. Holly contacted me weeks ago with her evidence. I've been in touch with the authorities. The elegant birthday party had transformed into a crime scene of exposed secrets. Jamie, the innocent catalyst of it all, began to cry silently, his small shoulders shaking. Without thinking, I pushed through the crowd and knelt beside him, pulling him into my arms. He buried his face against my shoulder, and I found myself signing the few comfort words I knew learned years ago in college. Holly watched us with tears in her eyes. That's not even the worst of it, she said quietly. Should I tell them about the others, Mrs. Hamilton? About all the lives you've destroyed to protect your precious reputation? My mother's mask finally shattered completely. Shut up! She screamed, lunging at Holly. Shut your lying mouth! But Jacob caught her arm before she could strike. The golden son holding back his society mother while defending the maid. If the situation weren't so tragic, it would have been poetic. No more lies, Jacob said firmly. I want to know everything. About my son, about what you've done. Everything. Holly nodded and began pulling more documents from her seemingly bottomless envelope. The birthday party was over, but the real celebration of truth had just begun. My mother wrenched her arm from Jacob's grip. Her carefully styled hair now disheveled, her makeup running in dark streams down her face. How dare you put your hands on me? I'm your mother. Everything I've done has been for this family. For this family. Jacob's voice rose to a level I'd never heard. You hid my son from me, my own child. How is that for this family? Henry, the private investigator, cleared his throat. If I may continue with what Mrs. Hamilton hired me to uncover. He pulled out a tablet, swiping through documents. The payment to Janice was just the beginning. Over the past decade, your parents have made similar payments to at least 6 other individuals. All former employees, all with potential scandals that could have damaged the Hamilton reputation. This is illegal, my father shouted. You can't just investigate private financial records. Actually, Isaac interjected, adjusting his glasses. When those payments are made from company funds and listed as consulting fees for tax purposes, it becomes fraud. And that makes it very much a legal matter. The crowd of guests had their phones out, now openly recording. I could already imagine the headlines. Connecticut Society Family exposed in birthday party scandal. My mother seemed to realize this too, her eyes wild as she spun around, seeing former friends capturing her downfall. Stop recording, she shrieked. This is a private matter, I'll sue every one of you. But the revelations kept coming. Henry continued reading from his tablet. There's also the matter of Ellen's adoption. The records show that Ellen's biological parents were Thomas and Marie Chen, former employees who died in a car accident 28 years ago. However, there are inconsistencies in the accident report and a large payment to the investigating officer at the time. The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What are you saying? I managed to ask. I'm saying, Isaac took over, his voice gentle but firm, that your biological parents were whistleblowers. They had discovered financial irregularities in the company and were planning to go to the SEC. Their accident occurred the night before their scheduled meeting with federal investigators. I felt Holly's hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. Suddenly, her 20 years of dedication to our family took on a different meaning. Had she known all along? Had she stayed to watch over me? You killed them, I whispered, staring at my adoptive parents. You killed my real parents and then raised me. We didn't kill anyone, Jim protested, but his denial rang hollow. The accident was investigated. It was ruled accidental. We took you in out of charity. Charity? Holly's voice cut through his lies. You took her in because you couldn't risk anyone else raising her and potentially investigating her parents' death. You needed to control the narrative. The sound of approaching sirens added to the chaos. Someone had called the police, whether for the disruption or because of the revelations, I couldn't tell. But my mother wasn't finished with her desperate attempts at damage control. She suddenly slapped Holly across the face, the crack echoing across the lawn. You ungrateful witch, after everything we've done for you. Jacob immediately pulled our mother back while several guests gasped. Holly touched her reddening cheek, but her expression remained resolute. Everything you've done for me. You mean holding my daughter's medical bills over my head for 20 years? This was news to everyone, including me. Holly had a daughter. In all our years together, she'd never mentioned family. Oh, yes, Holly continued, her voice growing stronger. My daughter was in a terrible accident 21 years ago. She needed multiple surgeries, treatments I could never afford. The Hamiltons offered to pay for everything, set her up with the best doctors, give her a chance at a normal life. All I had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak of anything I witnessed in this house. And yet, here you are breaking that agreement, my father said coldly. We'll take back every penny. Your daughter will lose her medical coverage. My daughter, Holly said with a small smile, is now a successful prosecutor with full health insurance. She doesn't need your blood money anymore. In fact, she's the one who encouraged me to finally speak up. She should be here any moment, actually. I believe she has some papers for you. As if on cue, a young woman in a sharp suit walked through the garden gate, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. She looked to be about my age, with Holly's same determined eyes and strong jawline. "Jim and Iris Hamilton," she said, holding up a badge. "I'm Assistant District Attorney Grace Chen. I have warrants for your arrest on charges of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and suspected murder." The last name made me freeze. Chen. Like my biological parents. Grace caught my eye and nodded slightly. "Hello, Ellen. I've waited a long time to meet you. Your parents, Thomas and Marie, were my godparents. I was 7 when they died. My mother," she gestured to Holly, "took the job here to investigate what really happened to them and to make sure you were safe." The birthday party had become a full crime scene now. Police officers were taking statements from guests, while my parents were being read their rights. Jacob stood with Jamie, trying to explain through tears and broken sign language that he was his father, that he hadn't known that he was sorry. Hope watched this interaction with stone-cold eyes before announcing to the crowd, "For the record, I've known about Jacob's affairs for months." Yes, affairs plural. Janice wasn't the only one. But she was the only one who got pregnant. "I've already filed for divorce and..." She placed a protective hand on her stomach. "This baby isn't his. It's Henry's." The investigator I hired became more than just a professional contact. At least I chose a man with integrity. The final blow came when Holly revealed one last recording from her phone. It was my mother's voice, slurred from wine, talking to someone on the phone just last month. "The doctor says Jim's heart medication is very particular about dosage. Too much, and it mimics a heart attack. No one would suspect a thing from a man his age with his stress levels." "You are planning to kill Dad!" Jacob stared at our mother in horror. "She's been slowly increasing my dosage." My father realized, his face gray. "The headaches, the chest pains. I thought it was stress from the SEC investigation." "What SEC investigation?" Isaac asked sharply. And just like that, another layer of crimes began to unravel. As the police led my parents away in handcuffs, the birthday cake sat untouched, its cheerful frosting a mockery of the devastation around it. Theodore, the actual birthday boy, had been whisked away by his nanny at the first sign of trouble. Jamie still clung to me, and I found myself thinking about cycles. My biological parents died trying to expose corruption. Holly and her daughter spent 20 years seeking justice. And now, here we were at a 5-year-old's birthday party, watching it all come crashing down. The Hamilton legacy wasn't one of success and society pages. It was built on blood lies and the suffering of innocence. And it had taken a deaf child's tears to finally bring it all to light. The next hours blurred together in a haze of police interviews, tears, and revelations that kept getting worse. We'd moved inside the house as crime scene investigators processed the garden. I sat in my father's study, the same room where I'd discovered my adoption papers 3 years ago, now watching officials box up evidence of decades of crimes. Grace Chen, Holly's daughter, and now the lead prosecutor on the case, had set up a makeshift command center in the dining room. Her team worked with frightening efficiency, cross-referencing documents Holly had collected over 20 years with what they'd seized from my father's files. "Ellen," Grace said, sitting across from me with surprising gentleness, "I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand the full scope of what your adoptive parents have done. Not just to your biological parents, but to dozens of others." She opened a file thick with photographs and documents. The first picture showed a young couple, Asian features similar to mine, smiling at a company picnic. "Thomas and Marie Chen, your parents. They discovered that Jim was embezzling funds through a complex network of shell companies. The money wasn't just for personal gain, it was going toward bribes, cover-ups, and payments to silence anyone who got too close to the truth." "How many people?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "At least 47 that we've documented so far," Grace replied. Employees who noticed discrepancies, journalists who asked too many questions, investigators who got too close. Not all were killed. Most were simply paid off or threatened into silence. But your parents, they refused to be bought. Holly entered the room, an ice pack pressed to her cheek where my mother had struck her. She sat beside me, taking my hand. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner, Ellen. But I had to gather enough evidence to make sure they couldn't escape justice. And I had to keep you safe. All these years," I said, tears flowing freely, "you were my guardian angel, my real family." "Family isn't always blood," Holly said softly. "Sometimes it's the people who choose to protect you, even when it costs them everything." Grace pulled out another document. "This is particularly disturbing. We found records indicating that Iris's first pregnancy before Jacob ended in the death of the infant. The official cause was listed as SIDS, but there are inconsistencies. The baby was Jim's child from an affair with his secretary. Iris discovered the affair while pregnant with Jacob. The secretary died in a house fire 2 weeks after the baby's death. The implications made me physically ill. She killed a baby, her own husband's child. We can't prove it yet," Grace admitted, "but the pattern is clear. Anyone who threatened the Hamilton image was eliminated, which brings us to Janice." She showed us Janice's employee file, a beautiful young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. Janice Wong was deaf from birth, but brilliant. She had a master's degree in accounting and was being fast-tracked for promotion until she became involved with Jacob. When she became pregnant, she initially tried to handle it alone, knowing the complications it would cause. But when she reached out to Jacob for help with medical expenses, your parents intercepted. Jacob appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. May I see her file? I need to know everything." Grace nodded, sliding the folder to him. Jacob's hands shook as he read through the documents, seeing medical records from Janice's pregnancy, her desperate emails that never reached him, and finally her death certificate. "She died alone," he said, his voice breaking. "In a charity hospital because my parents made sure she couldn't access proper medical care. They killed her as surely as if they'd put a gun to her head." "There's more," Holly said quietly. "The foster family that took Jamie, they were paid to be cruel to him. Your parents wanted to ensure that if he ever surfaced, he'd be too damaged to be a threat to the family reputation. They specifically requested placement with families known for their harsh treatment of disabled children." Jacob lunged for a waste paper basket, violently ill. Hope, despite everything, moved to steady him. Even in her anger and betrayal, she couldn't watch him suffer alone. "How?" Jacob gasped. "How could they do this to an innocent child, their own grandson?" "Because he was deaf," I said, the full horror of it hitting me. In their twisted minds, a deaf grandchild was a defect, evidence of imperfect genes in the perfect Hamilton line. Grace's phone buzzed. She answered, her expression darkening. The hospital confirmed it. Jim has been receiving elevated doses of his heart medication for the past 6 months. Iris had befriended his cardiologist's nurse, convinced her that Jim was forgetting his doses and needed extra. A few more months and he would have had a fatal heart attack. "She was going to kill me and frame it as natural causes," my father had said from the doorway, escorted by 2 officers. He looked broken, all his commanding presence gone. My own wife was slowly murdering me for the insurance money and full control of the company. "Don't act like a victim now," Grace said sharply. "You killed Ellen's parents. You abandoned your grandson. You've destroyed dozens of lives." "I never killed anyone directly," Jim protested weakly. "The car accident was just that, an accident. We just took advantage of the situation." "Liar." Holly stood, her composed mask finally cracking. "I have the recording of you on the phone with the mechanic who tampered with their brakes. I have the payment records. I have everything." She pulled out an old recorder, pressing play. My father's younger voice filled the room, cold and calculating. Make it look like an accident. Brake failure on that curve outside Westport. They drive it every day. And make sure the child is in the car. No loose ends. The last part hit me like a physical blow. You tried to kill me too, I was in the car. You were supposed to be, Grace said gently. But you had an ear infection that day. Marie's mother was babysitting. If you'd been in that car, we saved you, my father said desperately. We raised you, gave you everything. You raised me out of guilt and fear, I screamed. You killed my parents and kept me like a trophy of your crime. The revelations continued as Grace's team uncovered more evidence. A senator blackmailed into changing environmental regulations. A judge's son framed for drugs to ensure favorable rulings. A competitor's factory burned down with workers inside. Each crime meticulously documented in my father's own hand, his arrogance assuming his records would never be discovered. This goes back further than just Jim and Iris, Isaac said, studying genealogy documents. John Hamilton, Jim's father, started this pattern. He killed his business partner in 1963, made it look like a hunting accident. Built the entire Hamilton fortune on blood money. Jamie had fallen asleep in my arms, exhausted from the emotional turmoil. Looking at his innocent face, I wondered how many other children had suffered because of my family's greed. How many orphans? How many broken families? How much pain spread across generations? There's one more thing, Holly said, looking directly at me. Your biological parents left something for you. They knew they were in danger and set up a trust that the Hamiltons couldn't touch. It's been waiting for you to claim it on your 30th birthday. But given the circumstances, the courts will release it early. She handed me a letter yellowed with age but preserved in plastic. My mother's handwriting, delicate and flowing. Our dearest Ellen. If you're reading this, then our worst fears have come true. But know that we love you beyond words. We're fighting to make the world safer for you to expose those who would harm innocents for profit. Use what we've left you to continue that fight. You are our hope, our justice, our beloved daughter. Stand for truth, always. Love, Mom and Dad. The letter was dated 3 days before their death. They knew they were going to die, and they faced it with courage, thinking of me. As the police continued their investigation, as more victims came forward, as the Hamilton empire crumbled piece by piece, I held that letter and made a silent promise. I would use their legacy to fight for every person my adoptive family had wronged. Starting with Jamie. The Hamilton mansion became a war zone over the next 48 hours. FBI agents joined the local investigations, setting up monitoring equipment in every room. The scope of my parents' crimes had triggered federal involvement, and suddenly we weren't just dealing with state charges, but potential RICO violations that could bring down hundreds of co-conspirators. I hadn't slept since the party, surviving on coffee and adrenaline as I worked with Grace to understand the full extent of the evidence. Jacob had moved into the pool house, unable to stay in the main house where so many crimes had been planned. Hope had left for her sister's house, but surprisingly stayed in contact, texting updates about the baby and checking on Jacob despite everything. The first major break came when Jim agreed to testify against Iris in exchange for a reduced sentence. From his hospital bed where he was being treated for digitalis poisoning, he began confessing to crimes spanning 4 decades. She was always the mastermind. He told investigators, his voice recorded for the court. I thought I was ruthless in business, but Iris, she had no limits. The Chen murders were her idea. She said loose ends were like weeds, they'd grow back if you didn't pull them out by the roots. Don't believe him. Iris spat from her holding cell, her designer clothes replaced with orange jumpsuit. He's trying to save himself by throwing me under the bus. Everything I did was at his direction. I was just the supportive wife following orders. But the evidence told a different story. Holly and Grace had compiled recordings spanning 20 years, many featuring Iris bragging about her manipulations during wine-soaked lunches with her society friends. In one particularly damning recording, she detailed how she'd orchestrated the death of Jim's secretary and infant son. The baby was a mistake that needed correcting, Iris's recorded voice said casually. A pillow over the face during nap time reported as SIDS. No autopsy when grieving parents don't request one. As for the secretary, well, space heaters are so dangerous in old buildings. Tragic how quickly fire spreads when someone's been drinking and can't wake up. The investigation revealed that Isaac, our family lawyer, had been building a case for the FBI for 5 years. I stayed close to gather evidence, he explained during a deposition. Every crime they asked me to help cover up, I documented. Every bribe I was asked to facilitate, I recorded. I've been wearing a wire to family meetings since 2019. This betrayal hit my parents harder than any other. Isaac had been like family present at every major event, trusted with their darkest secrets. To learn he'd been an informant all along shattered their remaining confidence. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Theodore's nanny, Maria, came forward with a USB drive she'd found hidden in Iris's jewelry box. It contained a video diary Iris had been keeping, apparently planning to use it as insurance against Jim if needed. In the videos, Iris spoke candidly about murders, frame-ups, and financial crimes. But one entry stood out. It was dated just a week before the birthday party. I've decided Jim has outlived his usefulness, video Iris said, applying lipstick while speaking to the camera. The SEC is closing in and someone needs to take the fall. Better him than me. I've been increasing his medication slowly. Dr. Morrison thinks he's developing resistance, but really I'm building up to a lethal dose. Once he's gone, I'll play the grieving widow, pin everything on him, and walk away with the fortune intact. Jacob's weak, Ellen's not really family, and that deaf brat will never surface. I'll finally have everything I deserve. The mention of Jamie as that deaf brat revealed she'd known about him all along despite her protests of ignorance at the party. She'd been monitoring him through the foster system, ensuring he stayed hidden and damaged. Jacob watched the video with tears streaming down his face. She knew. The whole time she knew I had a son, and she let me believe Janice had just left. She watched me grieve a relationship while my child suffered. The foster family who'd taken Jamie came forward once immunity was offered. They painted a picture of systematic abuse encouraged and paid for by the Hamiltons. They wanted him broken, the foster father admitted. Extra money for every incident that required medical attention. Bonuses if he showed signs of developmental delays or behavioral issues. They said a damaged child could never be a credible threat if he ever tried to claim his birthright. But Jamie had survived it all. Despite the abuse, despite the neglect, he'd maintained a bright spirit that no amount of cruelty could extinguish. As I watched him play with building blocks in Grace's office, teaching me signs for different colors, I marveled at his resilience. He's remarkable, said Dr. Sarah Kim, a child psychologist brought in to evaluate Jamie. Most children who endure what he's experienced show severe attachment disorders and behavioral issues. But Jamie has an inherent strength, a light that refused to be dimmed. He'll need therapy and support, but his prognosis is excellent. The custody battle began immediately. Jacob desperately wanted to claim his son, but his history of affairs and complicity in his parents' cover-ups made him a questionable guardian. Hope, surprisingly, offered to help. "I'm not doing it for you," she told Jacob firmly. "I'm doing it for Jamie. Every child deserves a family, and despite everything, you're his father. Plus, my baby will be his half-sibling. I won't punish children for their parents' sins." "You'd help me get custody?" Jacob asked, stunned. "Supervised visits at first," Hope clarified. You need therapy, parenting classes, and to prove you can be the father Jamie deserves. Henry and I will provide a stable home environment. You can earn your place in Jamie's life, but you'll do it right this time. It was more grace than Jacob deserved, and he knew it. He agreed to every condition, desperate for a chance to know his son. Meanwhile, the financial unraveling of the Hamilton empire accelerated. Forensic accountants discovered hundreds of millions in hidden accounts, money laundered through charities and offshore shells. The legitimate business holdings were seized under asset forfeiture laws, leaving nothing of the Hamilton fortune intact. "It's fitting," Grace observed, watching federal agents catalog the mansion's contents. An empire built on blood money finally returned to the victims. The Victim Compensation Fund was established with Holly as one of the primary administrators. She knew every family the Hamiltons had destroyed, every life they'd ruined. Now she could finally help make things right. "I want to adopt Ellen formally," Holly announced during a quiet moment. "I've been her true mother for 20 years. It's time to make it legal." I broke down crying, hugging the woman who'd sacrificed so much to protect me. "I'd be honored to officially be your daughter." As for Iris, her attempts to manipulate the situation continued even from jail. She tried to seduce guards, bribe lawyers, and even attempted to hire a hitman to eliminate witnesses. Each attempt was caught and added to her charges. Her final mistake was trying to have Holly killed, not knowing the hitman she'd contacted through a cellmate was actually an undercover FBI agent. "Life without parole," the judge announced at her sentencing. "For someone who valued appearance above all else, you'll spend your remaining years known only as inmate 47832. Jim received 40 years, ensuring he'd die in prison. At 73, even with the possibility of parole, he'd never see freedom again. During his sentencing, he showed no remorse, only regret at being caught. "The only thing I did wrong," he said in his final statement, "was trusting the wrong people. Isaac, Holly, even my own wife, loyalty means nothing anymore." The irony of a man who'd betrayed hundreds complaining about loyalty was lost on no one. As the trials concluded and sentences were handed down, I found myself in possession of something I'd never expected: justice. My biological parents' murders had been solved. Their killer would die in prison, and their daughter had survived to carry on their legacy of truth. The courtroom was packed for what media had dubbed the trial of the century. 6 months had passed since the birthday party that exposed everything, and now came the final reckoning. I sat in the witness box facing the woman who'd pretended to be my mother for 25 years, ready to deliver testimony that would seal her fate. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor instructed. "Ellen Chen," I said firmly. "Formerly Ellen Hamilton. I've legally taken my biological parents' name." Iris's reaction was immediate and venomous. Even in shackles and a prison jumpsuit, she tried to project superiority. "You ungrateful brat, I gave you everything." "Order," Judge Patricia Wong commanded. The fact that she shared a surname with Janice felt like cosmic justice. My testimony lasted 3 hours. I detailed the emotional abuse, the constant reminders that I should be grateful for being rescued, the way Iris had systematically destroyed my self-esteem while elevating Jacob. But more importantly, I testified about what I'd learned since the party: the murders, the cover-ups, the intricate web of crimes that had destroyed so many lives. "She once told me," I said, looking directly at Iris, "that love was conditional on usefulness, that family was about preservation of legacy, not genuine connection." I believed her for so long, but watching her mock a deaf child, her own grandchild, I finally understood. She's incapable of love. She's only capable of ownership. Jacob's testimony followed mine. The golden sun's fall from grace had been complete, but in its place, something like genuine humanity had emerged. He spoke about discovering his son, about the affairs Iris had encouraged to prove his virility. about the toxic masculinity both parents had fostered that nearly destroyed his ability to form real connections. "My mother knew about every affair," he testified. "She said it was expected that powerful men had needs. She even selected some of the women employees she wanted to test for loyalty. Janice was different. I actually cared about her. Maybe that's why Mother had to destroy her." Hope took the stand next, 8 months pregnant and glowing with a peace that comes from escape. She revealed that Iris had tried to bribe her to stay with Jacob, offering millions to maintain the facade of a perfect family. She said divorce was failure. Hope testified that I should do what she did, find my own satisfaction elsewhere, but keep the family intact. When I refused, she threatened to destroy my father's business. She had blackmail material on everyone in our social circle. The parade of witnesses continued for days. Foster families who'd been paid to abuse Jamie. Employees who'd been threatened into silence. Families of victims who died in mysterious accidents. Each testimony added another bar to the cage Iris had built for herself. Holly's testimony was the most powerful. She revealed the full extent of her 20-year investigation, how she'd planted cameras, recorded conversations, and copied documents, all while playing the loyal servant. "I watched her poison her husband," Holly stated. "I have video of her grinding extra pills into his coffee. I have recordings of her planning murders like other women plan garden parties. But the worst was watching her psychological torture of Ellen. Every day she found new ways to remind that beautiful girl that she wasn't really family, that she was just a charity case they'd taken in." "Objection," Iris's lawyer called out. "Emotional testimony not relevant to the criminal charges." "Overruled," Judge Wong said coldly. The psychological abuse of a child taken in after her parents' murder is extremely relevant to establishing pattern and motive. When Iris finally took the stand in her own defense, she attempted one last manipulation. She claimed mental illness said Jim had gaslit her for decades, that she was a victim of coercive control. She even produced tears on cue, a performance that might have worked if the jury hadn't just watched hundreds of hours of video showing her bragging about her crimes. "You want to know the truth?" she finally snarled when her act failed to land. "Yes, I did it all. Every single thing they accused me of. Because someone had to protect this family's legacy. Someone had to make the hard choices. Jim was weak, always feeling guilty, always wanting to confess. I kept us strong. I kept us safe. And this is the thanks I get. Betrayed by the servant I lifted out of poverty. By the charity case I clothed and educated. By my own son, who couldn't keep his pants zipped." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Murder in the first degree for Thomas and Marie Chen. Murder in the second degree for Jim's secretary and infant. Attempted murder for the poisoning of Jim. Conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, the list went on for pages. Iris Hamilton. Judge Wong pronounced you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. To be served consecutively for each murder conviction. You will die in prison, and history will remember you not as the society queen you pretended to be, but as the monster you truly are. As they led Iris away, she turned to me one last time. You'll never be anything without the Hamilton name. You're nothing but the orphan we took pity on. I'm the daughter of Thomas and Marie Chen, I replied steadily. Heroes who died trying to expose corruption. And I'm the daughter of Holly Park, who risked everything to seek justice. I know exactly who I am. The trials concluded with Jim receiving his 40-year sentence. He'd outlive his expected lifespan in prison, but at least he'd avoided the death penalty by cooperating. Other co-conspirators received various sentences, and the Hamilton business empire was completely dismantled, its assets distributed to victims' families. Jamie officially became Jacob's son through a complex custody arrangement. Jacob had supervised visits while living in a small apartment working a regular job for the first time in his life. Hope and Henry provided Jamie's primary home, creating a blended family that somehow functioned despite its bizarre origins. He signed "I love you" to me yesterday. Jacob told me during one visit, tears of joy streaming down his face. He called me Dad in sign language. The Hamilton mansion was sold at auction, the proceeds going to the Victim Compensation Fund. The buyer turned out to be a non-profit organization that Holly and I had established with my biological parents' trust fund. We converted it into the Chen Center for Deaf Children, a place where kids like Jamie could receive education support, and most importantly, respect. At the dedication ceremony, Jamie cut the ribbon with small safety scissors, beaming as hundreds of deaf children and their families applauded in sign language. He'd gone from being mocked at a birthday party to being celebrated as the inspiration for a center that would help thousands. My biological parents fought for justice and died. I said in my speech, simultaneously speaking and signing. My adoptive parents perverted justice and will die in prison. But Holly, my chosen mother, shows us that justice delayed doesn't have to be justice denied. Sometimes it just takes 20 years of patience and courage to bring the truth to light. As I watched Jamie play with other deaf children, his laughter bright and free, I thought about cycles breaking. The Hamiltons had built their empire on silence, on victims too frightened or damaged to speak. But silence can be powerful in other ways. The silence of sign language built connections. The silence of patient investigation revealed truth. And the silence of a deaf child at a birthday party had brought down a dynasty of evil. 6 months after the trials ended, I stood in the garden of the Chen Center for Deaf Children, watching Jamie lead a group of younger kids in a game of hide and seek. His bright laughter no longer carried the weight of trauma. He was just a 7-year-old boy, playing with friends who understood him completely. "He's come so far," Jacob said beside me. He visited every week, taking sign language classes and attending therapy to deal with his own toxic upbringing. The Golden Sun facade had crumbled, revealing someone capable of genuine growth. Yesterday, he taught me how to sign butterfly. He said it looks like wings flying. Hope approached with her baby girl, 3 months old, and already charming everyone with her smile. Aurora's pediatrician says she's showing signs of being deaf in one ear, she told us calmly. Genetic testing shows it might run in Janice's family. Jamie's thrilled, says she'll be part of both worlds. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. What Iris would have seen as a defect, we saw as another thread connecting our unconventional family. Henry joined us carrying coffee and cookies from the center's cafe, run by deaf young adults training for careers in hospitality. "Grace called," Holly said, approaching our group. "The last of the civil suits settled. Every family Jim and Iris wronged has been compensated. It won't bring back the dead, but at least their children are provided for." Holly had officially adopted me 3 months ago. At 29, I'd gained the mother I'd always had, but never legally claimed. She'd also revealed more about those 20 years of patient investigation. Every cruel word Iris spoke, every crime planned over afternoon tea, Holly had documented while playing the perfect servant. "I almost broke so many times," she admitted during one of our late-night talks. "Watching her hurt you, seeing her poison Jim, knowing what she'd done to your parents. But Grace needed airtight evidence. One premature move, and they'd have destroyed us all." The center had become more than just a school. It was a testament to survival, to justice, to the power of truth over lies. We'd hired teachers from around the world, implemented cutting-edge technology, and created scholarship programs, ensuring no deaf child would be turned away for lack of funds. Isaac, cleared of any wrongdoing and revealed as an FBI asset, provided pro bono legal services. He'd spent 5 years gathering evidence from the inside, wearing wires, to family meetings, copying documents, building the case that finally brought justice. "Your biological parents would be so proud," he told me one day. "They died trying to expose one company's corruption. You've exposed an entire network of crime and created something beautiful from the ashes." I'd finally read through all my parents' documents, learning about the idealistic young couple who'd risked everything for truth. They'd named me Ellen after my grandmother, hoping I'd inherit her strength. They never imagined I'd need every ounce of it just to survive the people who murdered them. Jacob's transformation continued to surprise everyone. He'd gotten a job as an accountant at a nonprofit, using skills his parents had taught him for evil to instead help charities manage their finances. His supervisor didn't know his history, judging him only on his work and dedication. "I wake up every morning and choose to be better than I was raised to be," he told his therapy group, which I sometimes attended for support. "My parents taught me that people were tools to be used. But watching my son navigate a world that isn't built for him with such joy and determination, he's teaching me that real strength comes from vulnerability and connection." The romance that bloomed between Isaac's son Daniel and me felt like another form of poetic justice. We'd met during the trials, two children of opposite sides of the investigation, finding common ground in our shared experience of family betrayal and redemption. "I watched my father pretend to be complicit with criminals for 5 years," Daniel told me on our first real date. "He couldn't tell anyone, not even me. I thought he'd become corrupt like them. Finding out he was gathering evidence the whole time, it's like getting my father back from the dead." We took things slowly, both of us carrying trust issues that would take years to fully heal. But there was something healing about building love on the ruins of so much deception. We insisted on complete honesty, even when it hurt, refusing to let secrets poison another generation. Jim died in prison 8 months after sentencing. The official cause was heart failure, though rumors persisted that other inmates' fathers themselves had hastened his end. I felt nothing at his passing, no grief for the man who'd murdered my parents and pretended to be my savior. Iris, on the other hand, clung to life with the same vicious determination she'd shown in freedom. Reports from prison described her as unrepentant, still trying to manipulate guards and fellow inmates. She'd become a cautionary tale, the subject of true crime podcasts and documentaries, her designer clothes and society connections replaced by infamy. "She wrote to me," Jacob revealed one day. "Said she forgives me for betraying her. Can you imagine? She destroys dozens of lives and thinks she's in a position to offer forgiveness." We burned the letter together, watching her poisonous words turn to ash. It felt like a cleansing ritual, releasing the last hold she had on our lives. As the first anniversary of the birthday party approached, we decided to reclaim the date. Instead of remembering it as the day our family exploded, we'd celebrate it as the day truth finally won. The Chen Center hosted a massive party with hundreds of deaf children and their families gathering for games, food, and joy. Jamie blew out 7 candles on a cake that read, "Happy birthday to our hero," in both English and ASL. When he made his wish, he signed it for everyone to see. "I wish for all kids to have families who love them just as they are." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Jacob hugged his son, finally understanding what real love looked like. Hope and Henry applauded with their baby. Holly wrapped her arm around me, my chosen mother who'd sacrificed decades for justice. Grace stood with other prosecutors who'd become like family through the trials. "You know what the best revenge is?" Holly asked me as we watched Jamie open presents from his many new friends. "Living well, I guessed." "No," she smiled. "It's breaking the cycle. Every child who learns to sign here, every family that finds acceptance instead of shame, every life saved because we exposed those monsters. That's our revenge." We took their weapons of silence and secrets and turned them into tools of communication and truth. As fireworks lit up the evening sky, specially designed to be enjoyed visually for our deaf guests, I realized she was right. The Hamilton legacy of lies had been replaced by the Chen legacy of truth. And in that truth, we'd all found our freedom. Would you like to share your thoughts on family secrets and redemption? Have you witnessed truth triumph over lies in your own life? Please comment below with your experiences. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives of justice and hope. Share this with anyone who needs reminding that cycles of abuse can be broken and that chosen families can heal wounds blood relatives created. Thank you for joining Ellen's journey from deception to truth. And remember, sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks without sound.